Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Broadband Heroes, the podcast where we talk about all issues broadband and really highlighting amazing people doing great work in the broadband space. And today, man, I mean, we have a superstar in the broadband world and somebody who has gotten the Broadband Hero Award recently, Miss Angela Siefer. Is I saying that right? Siefer?
You are. Thanks, Nick. I'm really excited to be here. And I was so honored to get that award. I have it, actually. Do you want me to show it?
Oh, you
it's
should.
right here.
While you grab that, obviously, we also have a partner in crime here, Miss Jade, bringing all the policy and knowledge to bear. But, look at that.
Oh, look at that.
Isn't it beautiful?
It
I
is
have
beautiful.
to tell you, it is probably the sweetest award, like in terms of design. Whoever did that, kudos.
I will pass that on. So thank you so much. But for those of you who don't know, we have been doing this. We're trying to not only talk to broadband heroes on this podcast, but also award people in the industry that are doing great work. So without further ado, I do want to jump right into it. For those who don't know you, why don't you give a quick introduction of what the heck do you do? Where do you work? What's your title? And then we'll get into the fun stuff.
Yes, sometimes it seemed like all I do is my title. Just ask the family. I'm the executive director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. NDIA has been around about 10 years. We're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary in 2025 here. We got started because there wasn't an entity that represented digital inclusion programs who are in their communities, helping people get access to the internet, understand how to use it, be safe, do all the amazing things that one needs to do with the internet. So we help them connect to each other, we create resources and templates for them, but then also we're their intermediary with the federal government. So we encourage the federal government to understand the expertise of these local organizations and their needs and all the great things that they can do in order to craft useful policy, which is how one of the reasons we ended up with the Digital Equity Act, which we're very proud of.
So yeah, what was your role in helping to form that legislation and get it passed?
So when Senator Murray was first working on it, we were working with her, and I have no policy background. I have a sociology master's from the University of Toledo. But when we started NDIA, it was clear we needed to influence public policy. That was really the reason we got it started, was to influence public policy. So got a on the job training with Senator Murray's team, helping explain what was possible and what wasn't possible. And they really listened to us and what we knew about what was happening in local communities. And I really had no understanding of whether it would move forward or not move forward. And then it kind of sat for a little bit. And I was like, oh, I guess this is the way it works. And then when the pandemic hit, boom, folks were like, oh, wait, Murray has that bill, and they just popped it into the IIJA, did some negotiating, and because it was a bipartisan bill, so did their negotiating to make changes. And I remember the day when someone in that realm in DC said, we're now talking 2.75 billion. I was like, did you say billion? Because we had been talking millions, and now you're talking billions.
Yeah.
So that was a big moment, and it was during the pandemic, so I'm only hanging out with my family. So I go down to the family, and I'm like, they're talking 2.75 billion. And my son, who says, you mean million? I was like, no, actually, I mean billion. And we were all just very wide-eyed about all of it. So it was an exciting time. And I'm still very proud of the work that we did then.
I'm going to do a little Wayne's World, flip backwards in time a little bit. So, and I feel like as a fellow Buckeye, I can ask you these questions, but
do it.
You've been in the space for a while. So I'm not.
I think you might have just called me old.
No.
Oh, Nick.
Experience, wisdom. But I
don't care. I'm actually totally fine with this.
But I want to address the issue that when you started into this, and you mentioned, you didn't have your focus in government, but I think when you started and we talked about this, digital equity wasn't even a thing, right?
Right.
It wasn't. So I'm curious from when you started into this journey to now, like how has the definition or even the existence of digital equity changed?
Yeah, so the term keeps changing and the exactness of the work keeps changing, but the broad purpose stays the same. So it was probably 27, 28 years ago when I was in grad school, and I was working with a professor who asked community-based organizations, how can the university support you? And one of the answers they came back with was technology with our constituents, because they wanted to do more things online and they couldn't because the people that they supported weren't online. This was still the era of, not everyone had an internet connection. And so
you heard the modem sounds, what you're saying.
Yes, there were some modem noises in there. And that was a time when we started in on the issue and then asking around and figuring out what was happening nationally. And we're using, at that point, we used the term community technology. And then fast forward a few years after that, I ended up running what was called the Ohio Community Computing Network. So it was a statewide organization focused on what was then called community technology, and the community technology centers in particular, which then started to broaden to just community technology, because it may not be a whole center, it might be a program inside an organization. And the term digital divide was being kicked around, which is more a definition of the problem versus here's what we're doing. But then when we started NDIA, it seemed like it was time for some new terminology, and where we landed as a community, we did all this on the listserv. With the NDIA listserv was digital equity and digital inclusion. Digital equity being the goal, the community crafted a definition around that. Digital inclusion being the how. These are the programs that get us to digital equity. Those terms now, in this weird space where all of a sudden the work that I do has been universally appreciated by everybody. And now I'm getting like, what words do you use? Which is a weird space we can talk about.
That is interesting though, Angela. Like it's the terminology doesn't necessarily reflect what needs to happen because it's become politicized in some weird way.
It has become politicized, and it is a very weird space to be in, where I am still very proud of the fact that the community together crafted these definitions. Our definition is used in the IIJA legislation. Like, that's amazing that something the community crafted would then be reflected in legislation. So proud of that. And now to have those terms be a problem, and when we explain to folks what we really do and what our affiliates do, everybody's like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. We want grandma to be safe online. We want folks to have access to the internet, right? Nobody thinks it's a bad idea, but because of the words that have been used to describe it, the funding is just in jeopardy. Our registrations for net inclusion, our annual conference, are down because we call it net inclusion. It's just so mind-blowing to me. And so we're just in a new space where we have to figure out how to manage all that.
Okay, so we definitely need to touch on your conference and the work you're doing there to gather, these advocates together. But before we move forward, I want our listeners to understand that IIJA stands for
thank you. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act,
or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law.
That's right, which happened during the pandemic, and that's where the BEAD funds are inside that same legislation. Were kind of nestled together, BEAD and the Digital Equity Act.
So let's talk about the definition though a little bit. I mean, what is the definition of digital equity from your perspective?
Yeah, from our perspective.
From your perspective versus what it's obviously been politicized to be.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I don't think it's been politicized to be anything, which is part of the problem. So the digital equity, from our viewpoint, the digital equity is individuals and communities having full access to communication technology to do whatever it is that they need to do: health, workforce, home life, right? Finances, everything. And then digital inclusion is the actual activities that get us to the digital equity. So this is affordable, reliable home broadband. This is a device that really meets your needs, because a low-income household is more likely to have a mobile phone than a device that fully meets their needs. And the skills, being able to turn to a source of support and training, which some of us have tech folks in our lives. My husband's a tech folk. My son is, my daughter, like I have people to turn to. Sometimes people turn to me, but in some communities, there is not folks to turn to. And so we need to make sure that they have somebody to turn to so that they can utilize this amazing and sometimes dangerous technology.
I think that's it's an important distinction, right, of the activity of where the end state where you want to be versus the actions it takes to get there, right?
Right. Yeah.
Is there, I mean, is there anything about the digital equity right now that people just no one wants to say out loud?
I think it's just the terms.
It's
I
just
think
the
the fact that
term.
we used equity after digital, and then equity is being defined as a problem. The government is doing it, but then also sometimes people are self-censoring because they are scared of what the government might have impact on them.
Retribution, right? I mean,
It's a rough time. Like you know what? No judgment. Folks got to do whatever they need to do. We are really careful to say, if you need to call it whatever, I don't care what folks call it. The work is the work. So if you're calling it digital opportunity, you can call it digital access, whatever it is. Just be clear about what the work is. That's what matters. And then, because we have to make sure the work moves forward. We can't let the fact that those words are part of this like stop folks from getting the training they need or getting
Yeah, I like the way you're parsing that. And you mentioned earlier that it was part of IJA just as BEAD was part of IJA. But can you kind of explain why it was an addendum, not an addendum, but included as an equal partner to BEAD in the ending of the digital divide?
Yeah, I think there was, because of the pandemic, this is really all because of the pandemic, when folks saw kids sitting in a parking lot doing their homework because they didn't have access at home, even though they were in an urban area where that access existed, then that's when the light bulbs went on for lots of folks. And the recognition that when they were at home and needing help with homework, the caregivers in their homes were like, you want me to help you with what? What is Zoom anyhow? Right. So that digital skills part was so obvious to everybody during the pandemic. You have to have digital skills and the right device. There were laptops being figured out in communities across the country to get them into homes where they weren't, because that family only had a mobile phone and a limited data amount on that mobile phone, that the connectivity, the device, and the skills were all needed. I kind of felt like everything NDIA had done up to that point was in order to be able to be there. I had never been so popular and busy in my life, because it was just boom, 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 right? Like, and we wanted to be able to respond to that moment, and we did.
As I've asked around, we always try to do a research on our guests, and there's people that say that you've been critically responsible for moving digital equity from this, I would call it more isolated niche, however you want to say it, to more to the national priority, right? To where you've got it in the language in these acts. I'm curious on a personal level. I mean, what's driving you? Like, what got you the fire in the belly to like, holy shit, I'm gonna do this, versus like, was there a trigger?
I don't think there was exactly a trigger. I had spent time with those who do this work, digital inclusion practitioners. I will often talk about Wanda. Wanda runs the Ashbury Senior Community Computing Center in the east side of Cleveland, and she was one of my founding board members. And I had actually provided grants to Wanda when I was at the Ohio Community Computing Network. And she runs an organization that she set up, she founded, because she had taken her mom to the doctor years ago, and the nurse had set her mom in front of a computer, and her mom did not know how to use the computer. So when Wanda went to go check on her mom was still sitting in front of the computer like 30 minutes later. It's like, Mom, what are you doing? She's like, I don't know. The nurse put me here.
Oh my.
Right. So she's like, okay, I have to deal with this issue in my community because there are assumptions being made. And that was like 25, 26 years ago that this happened. And so because I understood what Wanda was doing, and that Wanda wasn't the only person, that there were also people across the country and that doing that same kind of work like Wanda, I am very much driven by that community-based work and want them to have all the resources and be as successful as they could possibly be, because they are trusted by the people they serve. And you can't just jump into a community and be like, I'm going to solve the digital divide, because technology is intimidating and it does in fact cause harm. And so if we don't have trusted folks who know how to help people actually understand how to use it and be safe and talk about it with examples and in the languages, literal languages that people understand, then we're not making any progress. So I did it really for Wanda. That's
Angela,
a short answer.
I think that's such an important story, because I'm thinking about when my mother who was not digitally literate at all, used to take me to donate blood. This is something she did, her entire life. And when I got older, there was a series of questions you have to answer on a computer in order to even be a donor, to even give back in that way, which is very meaningful to older communities who don't have health problems because they see that their friends need that. And like,
that's right.
You can't do that without digital literacy. You can't serve in the ways that you want to. So it's just so pervasive in our day-to-day lives and impacts those communities in ways that the average person doesn't understand.
Right. And we now talk about the internet as being essential, and it's not really a choice anymore. Sometimes I feel like total bad guy when I say that, but you really don't have a choice as to whether or not to be online. Because if you're not online, there's probably a proxy in your life who's doing it for you, because there are some things that are only possible online.
I was at a doctor a week or two ago, and I walked in and they handed me an iPad. And I was like, hey, no problem. Obviously, tech savvy, went through it. An older gentleman walked in probably 15 minutes later, and the office manager handed him an iPad. And he says, no. And he just pushed it right back. He's like, I don't do that.
Right.
And it struck me as like, holy cow, like he does it. He's like, he wouldn't do it. And part of it was, I think, probably fear, probably not knowing what to do. But like it prevented, to your point and Jade's point about her mom, like it prevented all that information that they really did need wasn't there, because he wasn't going to put it on a piece of paper.
No.
And they may not even have a piece of paper with that. And they probably don't, actually. So then he's not able to provide them with the historical background, his family history, all the stuff that can influence having a really valuable doctor appointment.
It's interesting that you both bring up this topic, but when we think, almost all the conversations around broadband and access, so much of it comes back to, access to Netflix, YouTube, like all these different, like all the things that are
entertainment.
They're entertainment. And obviously email, like, and these things, yes, they do help, obviously school and things, but I think, are we actually missing the boat a little bit on the education of the things beyond the easy ones? Like, should we be, from an education perspective and a messaging perspective, should we be talking more about these situations that truly impact people's health?
Yeah, absolutely. The telehealth side of things, right? Like, I have been able to have telehealth appointments where I don't have to leave my chair even though like the doctor's only 40 minutes away, still, I just save 40 minutes there and back, and that wait time in the waiting room. That's amazing. That's incredible. So yeah, the health pieces, the potential workforce, the jobs that are then possible because you become more comfortable with it. So in these digital skills training classes that our affiliates all teach, who are all independent organizations, there's over 2,000 of them now, they are very careful that they are helping people kind of where they are and helping them to become comfortable such that they can then do whatever it is they need to do the next time there's not a digital navigator sitting next to them. So developing that source, that resiliency, or that confidence to be able to figure something out online.
Why don't you explain, because I don't think maybe everybody understands how the affiliates, when you say affiliates for you, and you obviously go to your website, you can join the community, but maybe explain what that really is.
Yeah. So when we set up NDIA, we had to figure out what our structure was. And because we knew that there were folks like Wanda who were running programs across the country. What we've ended up with is we're calling them affiliates, and it's free to join. So these are people who are providing these digital skills programming. When there was the Affordable Connectivity Program, they're helping people get signed up for that. They're sometimes refurbishing devices, sometimes they're purchasing low-cost devices and either reselling them or trying to get grant funding or government funding to cover the cost of those to get them into the homes. They tend to be community-based organizations, libraries, housing authorities, and local governments for the most part.
So that's kind of those are your affiliates, but the organization writ large has membership. Do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yes, I wanted to talk about that. So there are those that do the work, right? So those are the ones that we call the affiliates, government and nonprofit. And then we also have corporate sponsorship. So those folks can join the listserv. We have, during the pandemic, realized that the listserv was incredibly valuable to lots of people, and we should ask corporate folks to be sponsors before we put them on the listserv. That was a big moment for us, because we had just been before, like when you're super tiny, you're like, come in, please, who will join us?
Yeah.
And then when you become more popular, like, hey, maybe we should actually figure out a strategy to this. Yes, we very much welcome for-profits and all to be part of the solution. And when some of those folks have really valuable services to offer, then they get pulled in even tighter to the community. And we do have an interesting group in our community who is mostly doing the digital inclusion programming, but then there are also those who are very active in their communities, and the broadband deployment side is something that they are concerned about or active in a stakeholder engagement kind of way or in an advocacy kind of way. Particularly the solutions that will have a low cost offer. So the ones that are more accessible to or considering of the local community.
It seems like you've been very adept at bringing members along to these ideas of broadband affordability. If they're an NDIA member, like what are you doing on that side? What are you doing on the inclusion side? And are there any specific examples of members who have risen to the occasion and really exemplified what NDIA's mission is?
So many. So I just was asking for an examples from our community of those who are teaching. We are now trying to get an understanding of those who are integrating AI skills training into their basic digital skills training. AI is the next digital divide, and it's already here. One can't avoid it, just like the internet. It's in your application. So understanding when it's in front of you and whether or not you should trust it and how to make best use of it is something that should be included in any basic digital skills training. So I was asking who's doing this, and one of the responses I got back was NOCAC, which is actually here in Ohio, Northwest Ohio Community Action Commission, and got this lovely email. I know, right? Go Northwest Ohio. This lovely email of how they, at last year's Net Inclusion, Dell had sponsored an AI playground type of space where folks can ask questions and engage with different AI applications on kiosks. And she had participated in that. She'd gone to the AI sessions at the conference and went back and talked to her organization, and they started figuring out how they could improve the admin side of their work and be more efficient with some of these AI tools, but then also how they could integrate it into their digital skills training. So like, that's all new and it's unknown. And God bless Jamie. She was like, let's figure it out.
Yeah, because those are the people who are going to like provide the framework for
the rest, for everybody else. That's exactly right. So we have an AI working group right now that Jamie and others participate on, who are not, I wouldn't say that they're like super far down the path yet, because this is all so new, but they're like, here's what we're trying. We just did a pilot in Winston, North Carolina, where we helped them integrate some AI skills training. So here's an example. We teach in a basic digital skills training course, you learn how to use a browser. And so now that you have an AI answer pop up at when you ask Google something, knowing, do you trust it? Like maybe it's fine if you're getting some creative ideas on how your kid's birthday party, but you may not want to rely upon it if you have a health question. Like that kind of training needs to be part of any digital skills class.
So Angela, you've mentioned a few times net inclusion. So I'd love for you to tell our audience what are you talking about and why they need to be there.
Yes, this is our annual conference. The inclusion part of it is still like, people say, maybe we should just call this the NDIA conference. I don't know. It's been net inclusion for 10 years. And it's called net inclusion because we want everybody to be on the internet. And so this conference is really about our affiliates being able to share best practices. We have 250 speakers. That's because we encourage folks, we try to limit folks not speaking on multiple panels because they all have so much to share.
Huh.
And we don't want to listen to the same voice again and again. So we're estimating about 900 attendees this year. We had 1,300 last year. But think about that, 900 attendees and over 250 of them are speakers because everybody has something to offer. And we really want them to be able to make those connections with each other and have them share what it is that they have learned in their communities. And it's the groups that I've just been talking about, those who are helping people get connected to the internet, who really care about affordability, about the right device. Some are actually refurbishing devices. There's going to be folks talking about that. And then there's the policy side of all of it. And we have a lot of discussions about, now we have a lot of discussions about advocacy. How do you talk about your work and help folks understand what you really do?
I've got to ask you from the advocacy perspective, which is kind of my, heart and soul.
Yeah.
What is your membership doing? What are you doing to try to keep alive this $2.75 billion program that is law? It has not been wiped out by another congressional act, which it will take to wipe it out. But what can we all be doing to advocate for it? What are the reasons it needs to stay alive? What is the value it brings to the American public?
Yeah. So the value, I think, is everything that we've just been talking about. If we want the BEAD funds to be successful, which we all do, right? Universally, they should be successful. Then we need folks to understand how to use that technology, and we need them to fully engage in it also. So that's what these Digital Equity Act funds do. The conference itself, 900 people, probably maybe 1,000, who are all sharing these kinds of best practices and really wanting each other to be successful. So the advocacy piece we're going to be teaching that at the conference. We have resources on our website. We have more than we've ever had before, templates that you can use. We have state one-pagers, what Digital Equity Act funds are expected to go into that state. What are the funds for? We've looked at the digital equity or digital opportunity plans in every state, so we can say what their priorities are. We just took 22 people from 16 different organizations to DC, specifically to walk into Republican offices, because we want to make sure that they understand and that these words are not going to keep the Digital Equity Act from moving forward, and making sure that we have enough folks understanding what it is, that if somehow the Digital Equity Act should show up on a list of money that would be pulled back by Congress, that we could get a heads up about it. And so we could try to make the case again that this funding needs to move forward, because it really is supportive of BEAD, but it's also just really good for the whole country.
Do you think, I obviously think that I know the answer to this, but when you think about trying to convince policymakers or communities to change, right? I mean, you've had to face both. Has it shifted, right? Was it hard to get communities to understand the need? And now it seems like it's obviously much harder to get the policymakers to understand the need.
That's a really interesting question, Nick. I think the communities came at it themselves. We did not convince the communities. The pandemic convinced communities.
Yeah.
So like, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and prior to the pandemic, there really wasn't much in the digital inclusion space happening here. Pandemic hit and folks were like, we have got to address this. Now we have an incredibly robust digital inclusion coalition in Central Ohio. I'm super proud of it. There's folks talking to each other. They really know what's going on. They're planning together. They're setting terminology together. They're fundraising together. All the things that should be happening in every community is happening in Columbus, Ohio. Convincing policymakers, I feel like that is NDIA's job, right? That is our job, and it's the job of the affiliates also. All of us have to be convincing policymakers of what this work is. Let me rephrase that. I guess we're convincing them of the Digital Equity Act's value, because we're explaining what the work is, to clarify that the terms used are not a problem. And if they want to change the name of the program, fine, change the name of the program. Let's just make sure we keep the program.
Yeah. I think that's such an important distinction, because the Digital Equity Act often gets lumped into the DEI purge,
right?
But it's not about that. It's about helping seniors access telehealth, or helping low-income folks learn how to apply for a job where the application is only available online. And so it's two different policy goals.
It is.
Not that both aren't great, but let's not, conflate them.
Right. I think it's important to understand the reason we use the term digital equity, because in the term digital inclusion, is that we wanted to involve everybody, right? So the inclusion term is very clearly about everybody, and that includes folks in rural areas, right? So and older adults and veterans and people with disabilities, and God, the list is so long. It's really everybody.
Yeah, everybody meaning, hey, it's Republicans and Democrats and Independents. It's everybody.
It really is everybody. And the equity piece is about meeting folks where they are. So I think what we've learned is that you need to make sure that you're not just this happened during the pandemic. Let's buy a whole bunch of hotspots and a whole bunch of laptops, and we're going to solve the digital divide. How many times did folks hear that during the pandemic, right? Really well-meaning, well-intentioned, right? God bless them. But they were Band-Aids, and they weren't always even what somebody needed, right? Maybe what they really needed was some digital skill support, right? Like when the grandma's told she needs to help her grandchild that she takes care of get online and get on Zoom, and she's like, I don't have an internet connection. I've never needed an internet connection. I want an internet connection. And then the school's like, you have to have an internet connection, right? So it becomes then a way more, it becomes wanting to address the particular barriers that a particular household is facing, and that's digital equity. It's addressing the exact barrier of that exact household, rather than, okay, well, we're going to solve the digital divide. Everybody must need a laptop. Let's just throw a bunch
Oh, that's perfectly put. You're right. But that's the kind of short-term solution that sounds good and is very checkmark, right?
Yes.
And that's great for politicians, but for long-term policy that impacts people's lives takes a little bit more work.
It does. And I think we fully understand that some of the households that are not fully participating online are the hardest to reach. So that's also where the inclusion comes in, right? If there's a particular older adult who's been resisting it for whatever reason, you have to really address their particular, for example, they probably saw some friends get scammed, and they're like, you know what? My friend Betty, she got scammed. I'm not doing it because I'm going to get scammed too. So addressing that particular barrier that she has in order for her to be able to participate is then helping her be safe and helping her see the value. You're like, look, you can get some quilting templates. What? Quilting templates? Right? Because if that's what she cares about, then you're right. Coupons now are only online, by the way. You can't really clip them the way you used to. Grocery stores are like, get our app, and then so people who rely upon their coupons, they really need
knowing that hook to get people engaged in the product they need.
That's right. And it's not the same for everybody. Some people are like, coupons, I don't care about coupons. I don't want coupons. But somebody else is like, okay, now I'm in because you talked to coupons.
Is NDIA's role to try to move, when you obviously been heavily involved in the policy part, and a lot of the policy and so many conversations that happen in a lot of these shows and our conversations have been around infrastructure. We've spent the last, little bit of this conversation talking beyond infrastructure. So I'm just wondering, do we need to flip the switch or flip the script, so to speak, of when we talk about, inclusion and equity is part of the problem, that we just are so focused on freaking infrastructure and not going beyond that? How do we change that message?
Kudos to you all, right? Kudos to Bonfire for doing this, because you are flipping the script, right? You are making sure that message is getting out there, that we have to address both of these. It's going to be very possible that one is able to deploy broadband in a particular community and they don't have the subscription signups that they were hoping for because there's a particular barrier they hadn't addressed. Like, everybody knows Betty who got scammed. Yeah. And they didn't realize everybody knows Betty, and that's what's keeping their subscriptions from going up. So that's why having those digital inclusion programs where they get in there and really talk to people, that's what's going to change some of those subscription numbers.
I think that's such an important message that goes hand in hand with deployment goals, because deployment only works when the OpEx works, or when you have enough people to sustain the network. And if you have these populations that are mistrustful of the internet or don't have the ability to fully understand it or utilize it, it doesn't work for even the infrastructure piece. And that was what was so great about the bipartisan infrastructure law, is that it married these goals, recognizing that they're not separate goals. They're actually pretty contingent upon each other.
It's pretty amazing that Congress got something so right. I mean, come on. Right?
That's funny. Hey, I mean, they get it right sometimes.
It can happen, and it could
Yeah.
happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, well, I'm going to pivot a little bit, have a little bit of fun. As Jay
Okay.
knows, I'd like to do a little lightning round with our guests. So I'm going to hit you with a couple different questions, and we're going to see what you say. All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
I know maybe you need to go get a cocktail, but all right. If there's one policy acronym you never want to hear again, what would it be?
Oh man, Slurf-erf.
Slurper, state and local fiscal recovery funds.
Nice job, Jade. Yes.
Like, who came up with that?
Who came up with that? Come on, these young staffers, we expect them to come up with a good one. IIJA, that's not too bad because IJA kind of works.
Yeah.
Slurf-erf.
All right, that's a good one. All right, now, if NDIA had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh man.
Gloria Gaynor.
Eye of the Tiger.
I will survive. Okay.
Yeah, I will survive. That's probably a good one. Well, I don't know. We'll see if that comes true in the next couple of years. Yeah.
All right, that's a good one.
These are rough days.
Is there any NDIA summit moment that just like lives in your head and you always think about?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two that live in my head. The one is the year after we got the 2.75 billion allocated for digital equity, going to the conference and getting a standing ovation. That was like from my community, right? The people that I do this for, that they did that for me. That was just amazing. Last year, walking into the ballroom and seeing the ballroom set for 1,300 people.
Wow.
Like, that's a big ballroom. 1,300 people coming to a conference to talk about these issues. That was incredible.
Very cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I feel like the last question, maybe that you just gave the answer, but I'll still ask anyway. So what gives you hope when nothing else does right now?
It's definitely the community, right? Like, they're the ones still doing their work. They're still teaching people how to use the internet. And in their own communities, they are also having these terminology challenges, and they're still doing it. One of the other organizations that we work closely with is Jewish Family Services in Columbus, and that's actually not too far from my home. So I was able to go for a walk with their CEO yesterday, and their purpose is focused on refugees. They've been in existence. It's like a 50-year-old organization. They've been around a long time. And they're not going to change that they serve refugees. This is what they do. And they also help them with technical skills, right? So they are ready to find that next job. They can participate in talking to their family and their doctors and everything online. And talking to her and hearing her explain some of the challenges they're going through, and that she's not giving up. She's talking about the future of the services they provide and how they're going to have to adjust and they're going to have to change. And you can't just sit around crying and whining. You have to figure out a way forward.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's happening in our local communities with people who provide all kinds of human services, including digital navigation services. They are figuring out how to move forward. And it's always been more comfortable for me to talk about what our affiliates do than to talk about what NDIA does, even though I have an incredible team who does amazing work. But that on the ground work, those folks are the heroes. And when I talk to them and I hear how they're managing the current situation, particularly folks like Jewish Family Services who have lost big chunks of funding, and she's just figuring out the next step. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's what we call internally. They got gas. They got the give a shit factor.
Yeah.
I love that.
They got some gas in the tank in that community, right? That's
yes, amazing.
It's amazing work that you're doing, NDIA is doing. If this podcast was broadcast worldwide, well, not worldwide, the entire U.S. broadband community, if they were listening right now, what's your call to action? Like, what's the call to action to me, to Jay, to anybody who's listening? What is your call to action to us?
I think at this particular moment in time, the call to action is talk about what the terms digital inclusion and digital equity mean, because it is not fully understood. Even lots of folks in the broadband community do not know what these terms mean. Talk about what they are so that folks who may at some point in their life on this earth have an opportunity to make a correction somewhere when folks have a misunderstanding, and to provide that real information. It's really about helping grandma be safe online. It's really about veterans being able to talk to their doctors. It's really about students being able to do their homework. Like, that's what this work is really about.
Oh God, that is such an important point, such an important distinction, in contrast to the politicization of a lot of these terms. Thank you, Angela. That's great.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for taking the time. For those of you who don't know about, you can go to digitalinclusion.org, right, is your website?
It is.
And the big conference on May 20th to the 22nd.
20th to the 22nd, we're in Gila River. So we're first time that we're having net inclusion in Indian country. So we're super excited about highlighting all the amazing work going on there. Yeah, join us. Registration's still open. We'd love to see you there. Oh, and it's only 30 minutes from the Phoenix airport, or less, depending upon traffic.
Nice.
That's easy. Yeah, that's an easy airport. Well, again, thank you. You are truly, as you know, a broadband hero in our eyes and in many others. So thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday afternoon before the weekend. So we greatly appreciate it. And for those of you who are watching, you can continue to watch other episodes of the Broadband Heroes podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you watch your podcast, because you do have internet connections. So thank you so much. Thanks, Angela.
You guys are amazing. Thank you.